The year is 1242, and the kingdom of Mercia is held in the silent, unrelenting grip of a midwinter frost. Outside the heavy, iron-studded oak doors of the royal manor, the world has been reduced to a monochrome landscape of slate-gray skies and endless, undulating drifts of white. The air is so cold it feels brittle, as if the very atmosphere might shatter like glass if struck by a sudden sound. But here, within the thick limestone walls of the Mistress's private solar, the passage of time has slowed to a rhythmic, hypnotic crawl. There is no urgency here. There are no decrees to be signed, no battles to be plotted, and no courtly intrigues to navigate. There is only the steady, low hum of a life lived in the quiet intervals between the falling of the snow and the rising of the moon. You are tucked away in the high tower, a space carved out of stone and softened by layers of heavy, hand-woven wool. The room is circular, wrapping around you like a cocoon. The walls are 3 feet thick, insulating you from the howling wind that whips across the battlements. To look at the walls is to see the history of the earth itself. The limestone is a pale, creamy beige, textured with the tiny, fossilized remains of ancient sea creatures. If you run your fingers along the stone, it is cool, not freezing, but possessive of a deep, earthen chill that serves only to make the warmth of the hearth feel more miraculous. The fire is the heart of the room. It does not roar, it breathes. Great logs of seasoned oak, dragged in from the forest weeks ago and dried until they were bone pale, now sit atop the wrought iron andirons. The flames are not frantic. They are a deep, saturated orange at the base, tapering off into a soft, translucent yellow at the tips. They lick lazily at the bark, turning it into a delicate, silver-gray ash that falls away in silent flakes. The sound of the fire is a constant, rhythmic companion, a soft pop as a pocket of sap ignites, followed by the long, low hiss of moisture escaping from the end of a branch. It is a sound that requires nothing of you. It is a sound that invites your mind to drift, to settle, and to eventually grow heavy with the weight of peace. In the center of the room stands a heavy trestle table made of dark, oiled walnut. On its surface lies the evidence of a day spent in quiet, repetitive labor. There is a small pile of dried lavender, its scent faint and herbal, mingling with the heavier, sweeter aroma of the beeswax candles that stand in pewter holders. The candles are thick and tall, their wicks trimmed perfectly to ensure a steady, flicker-free light. As they burn, the wax melts into a perfectly level pool at the top, occasionally overflowing to send a single, viscous tear of wax rolling down the side. The cooling wax hardens almost instantly, creating a tactile ridge that you can trace with a fingernail, smooth, slightly yielding, and infinitely dull. Beside the candles lies a piece of parchment, weighted down by a smooth river stone. The parchment is made of fine vellum, scraped until it is as thin as a leaf and as soft as silk. It bears no grand secrets. It is merely a list, a slow, methodical tally of the winter stores. You spend a long time looking at the ink. It is a deep, brownish black made from oak galls and iron salts. You observe how the ink has bitten into the surface of the vellum, creating tiny, microscopic feathers at the edges of each letter. You count the items listed in a slow, internal monologue. 40 wheels of hard cheese wrapped in wax, 60 smoked hams hanging from the rafters of the larder, 12 barrels of salted herring, 30 sacks of dried peas, and 10 jars of honey, harvested when the sun was high and the bees were loud in the clover. The act of mental inventory is a soothing exercise. You imagine the larder downstairs, cool and dark, smelling of salt and dried herbs. You picture the jars of honey, the golden liquid moved into a slow, crystallized state by the winter cold. You think of the texture of the honey, thick, grainy, and slow to pour. It would take several minutes for a single spoonful to slide from the jar into a bowl of warm porridge. You dwell on that slowness. You embrace it. The windows are small, deeply recessed into the stone. Each pane of glass is hand-blown, filled with tiny bubbles and subtle ripples that distort the world outside. Through the glass, the falling snow looks like a gentle, chaotic dance of gray specks against a darker gray sky. The flakes do not fall straight down. They swirl in lazy eddies, caught in the invisible currents of the air. You watch a single flake as it approaches the glass. It touches the pane and lingers for a heartbeat before vanishing, turned into a microscopic bead of water by the warmth emanating from the room. You find yourself waiting for the next flake, and the next, your breathing sinking with the silent, rhythmic descent of the winter sky. The floor is covered in a thick layer of dried rushes, woven together with sprigs of dried meadowsweet and mint. As you move across the room, the rushes give way beneath your feet with a dry, satisfying crunch. It is a soft, muffled sound, like the crushing of autumn leaves under a blanket of snow. The scent of the herbs rises up to meet you, a dusty, green aroma that speaks of summer days long past, now preserved in the stillness of this chamber. You walk slowly, feeling the texture of the rushes through your soft, leather-soled slippers. Each step is deliberate. Each step is a celebration of the mundane. In the corner of the room, near the warmth of the hearth, sits a large wooden loom. It is a sturdy frame of pine, its surface worn smooth by years of use. Strands of undyed wool, the color of a cloudy morning, are stretched tight across the frame. You sit on a low stool, your back straight, your hands resting on the shuttle. The wool is coarse but warming. It smells faintly of lanolin and the damp earth of the sheepfolds. You begin to weave, a process that is as repetitive as the ticking of a clock. The shuttle slides through the warp threads with a gentle shushing sound. You beat the threads together with a wooden comb. Thump, thump, thump. The rhythm is hypnotic. It occupies the hands while the mind wanders through the silent, snow-covered forests that surround the castle. You imagine the trees, oaks, ashes, and thorns, their branches heavy with the weight of the snow. The silence in the woods must be absolute. No birds sing. The squirrels are curled tight in their nests. The deer huddle together in the lee of the hills. The only sound would be the occasional crump of a branch finally giving way under the white burden, or the soft, muffled thud of a mass of snow hitting the ground. You dwell on the stillness of the forest. You feel the cold of the woods in your mind, which only serves to deepen the appreciation for the warmth of your woolen skirts and the steady radiance of the fire. The king's mistress is not a role of grand balls and glittering jewels in this season. In the winter, she is the keeper of the quiet. Her duty is to maintain the sanctuary of the solar, to ensure that the light never fails and the fire never dies. You take a small iron poker and gently nudge the logs in the hearth. A shower of sparks rises up the chimney, glowing like tiny, temporary stars before they are swallowed by the darkness of the flue. The logs shift, settling into a new arrangement that will provide heat for another hour. You watch the embers, a glowing landscape of deep crimsons and vibrant oranges. They look like a miniature city seen from a great distance, a city of heat and light buried deep within the heart of the wood. The air in the room is heavy with the scent of wood smoke and old stone. It is a comfortable weight. It presses against your skin, reminding you that you are safe, that you are enclosed, and that the world outside cannot reach you. You pick up a silver goblet, its surface tarnished to a soft, dull gray. Inside is a spiced ale, warmed by the fire. You don't drink it yet. You simply hold the goblet between your palms, feeling the heat transfer from the metal to your skin. The warmth spreads through your fingers, into your wrists and up your arms. It is a slow, creeping sensation of comfort. You think about the logistics of the evening. Soon, a servant will arrive, not with a flourish but with a quiet knock and a bowed head. They will bring a tray of simple food, a loaf of coarse brown bread, a wedge of sharp cheese, and perhaps a baked apple, its skin split and bubbling with cinnamon and sugar. You anticipate the sound of the wooden tray being set upon the walnut table, the dull thud of wood on wood. You anticipate the smell of the warm bread, the yeasty, earthy aroma that fills a room like a physical presence. But for now, there is only the silence. The silence is not empty. It is full of the sounds of the room, the sigh of the wind in the chimney, the creak of the floorboards as the house settles into the cold, the rhythmic breathing of your own lungs. You close your eyes for a moment, and the darkness behind your eyelids is patterned with the afterimages of the firelight. You are a king's mistress, but more importantly, you are a creature of the winter, a dweller in the soft, gray spaces of a frozen world. The character of the light begins to change as the afternoon deepens into twilight. The pale gray outside turns to a deep, bruised purple. The bubbles in the window glass become more prominent, catching the last of the light and turning it into tiny, glowing orbs. The shadows in the corners of the room stretch out, reaching toward the center of the floor like long, dark fingers. The world is retreating into itself, pulling the blanket of night over its head. And you, within your tower, are retreating too, sinking deeper into the velvet cushions, feeling the heaviness of the day settle behind your eyes. There is no rush. There is no tomorrow that demands your attention. There is only the long, slow evening, the warmth of the hearth, and the rhythmic fall of the snow against the ancient stone. You are safe. You are warm. You are tired in the most peaceful way possible. The story of the winter is just beginning, and it is a story that will be told in whispers, in the crackle of fire, and in the long, beautiful monotony of a world asleep. The twilight has fully surrendered to the deep, indigo ink of a medieval winter night. Inside the solar, the transition from the dim afternoon to the total darkness of the exterior world is marked only by the increased vibrancy of the hearth. The shadows have now claimed the high corners of the vaulted ceiling, where the stone ribs meet in a silent, structural embrace. You find yourself focusing on the texture of the shadows. They are not flat black, but a layered, velvet depth that seems to absorb the very essence of the cold. The light from the fire creates a flickering theater on the tapestries that line the northern wall. These hangings, thick and heavy with the scent of age and cedarwood, depict scenes of a summer hunt, dogs leaping through tall grass, hawks circling a pale blue sky. But in this light, the colors are muted. The greens of the forest scenes are now a muddy charcoal, and the gold threads of the sun are merely dull glints in the shifting orange glow. You move to the window once more, not to look out, for there is nothing to see now but the reflection of your own room mirrored against the black glass, but to check the latch. The iron handle is freezing to the touch, a sharp, metallic bite that contrasts with the woolen sleeve of your gown. You feel the faint, persistent vibration of the wind as it pushes against the casement. It is a low-toned hum, a structural moan that tells of the immense pressure of the winter air. You imagine the wind traveling across the frozen fens and through the skeletal branches of the great oaks, carrying with it the crystalline dust of the high atmosphere. It knocks at the glass, seeking entry, but the stone and the lead and the iron hold firm. You turn back to the room, the contrast of the interior warmth feeling like a physical weight, a soft pressure against your chest. On the small side table sits a collection of apothecary jars, each one a different shape of hand-blown green glass. You decide to spend a long, meditative time organizing them. This is a task of absolute insignificance, and therefore it is perfect. You pick up a jar filled with dried rose hips. They are shriveled and hard like tiny red pebbles. As you tilt the jar, they slide against the glass with a dry, musical clink. You set it down on a fresh spot on the table, carefully aligning the base with the edge of the wood. Next, you take the jar of dried chamomile. The flowers are pale and fragile, a tumble of ivory and faded yellow. You unscrew the lid, and the scent that escapes is like a memory of a dusty meadow, sweet, apple-like, and profoundly calming. You close it slowly, feeling the resistance of the cork as it seats itself back into the neck of the bottle. The process continues, jar by jar. Valerian root earthy and pungent, dried mint sharp and cool even in its desiccated state, lavender buds small and grainy like purple sand. You arrange them by height, then by color, then by the clarity of the glass. The repetition of reaching, grasping, lifting, and placing becomes a mantra. Your movements are fluid and slow, unhurried by the passage of time. The firelight catches the curves of the glass, creating miniature suns within each jar that dance and flicker as you move. The king will not visit tonight. The snow has drifted too high in the outer courtyard, and the trek from the main keep to this secluded tower is a journey of unnecessary peril and discomfort. This knowledge brings a profound sense of liberation. The room is yours alone. The silence is yours. You are the sovereign of this small, heated square of the universe. You look at the large bed in the alcove, draped in heavy furs and silk quilts. The mattress is stuffed with the finest down, taken from the underbellies of geese. It is a vast, soft landscape waiting to be explored. But the time for sleep is not yet here. There is still much to be experienced in the waking quiet. You return to the hearth and sit in the large, high-backed chair carved from English oak. The wood is cool against your palms, the grain raised slightly where the oil has worn thin over decades. You begin to notice the smaller sounds of the room that you had previously ignored. The rhythmic tick-tock of a small water clock in the corner, the steady, persistent drip of water falling from one leaden basin into another. Each drop represents a moment passing, a heartbeat of the world. You find yourself waiting for each drip, counting them. 1, 2, 3, The sound is muffled, a liquid plink that settles into the silence like a stone into a still pond. Then there is the sound of the parchment you left on the table. A stray draft, perhaps escaping through a hairline crack in the masonry, causes the edge of the vellum to flutter. It makes a dry, scratching sound against the walnut wood, like the ghost of a quill writing a letter that will never be sent. You watch the paper move. It lifts a fraction of an inch, then settles, lifts and settles. It is a tiny, inconsequential motion, but in the stillness of the solar, it is as captivating as a storm. You decide to prepare a small amount of ink, not because you have anything to write, but for the sensory pleasure of the process. You take a small stone mortar and pestle. You place a few dried oak galls into the bowl, small, hard, round growths that feel like wooden marbles. You begin to grind. The sound is a low, gritty growl. Grit, grate, grit, grate. You feel the resistance of the galls as they resist the stone, then the satisfying crunch as they finally splinter. You work them into a fine, tan powder. The motion of your arm is circular and steady. Your shoulder feels a slight, pleasant ache from the repetition. Next, you add a small amount of copperas, iron sulfate, and a splash of rainwater collected from the barrel in the courtyard before it froze. As the liquid hits the powder, a chemical magic occurs. The tan dust begins to darken, swirling into a deep, bruised purple before settling into a permanent obsidian black. You stir it with a small wooden stick. The ink is viscous and glossy. You watch the way it clings to the side of the mortar, sliding down in a slow, thick ribbon. The smell is metallic and sharp, the scent of history and record-keeping. You spend many minutes simply stirring the ink, watching the firelight reflect off its black, liquid surface. It is a dark mirror, holding the entire room in its small, circular depths. The cold outside has deepened. You can tell by the way the wood in the walls begins to contract. A sudden crack echoes through the room, a loud, dry snap as a structural beam adjusts to the plummeting temperature. It is a startling sound, but not a frightening one. It is the house speaking, announcing its strength, its ability to hold the weight of the winter. You acknowledge the sound with a slow nod and turn your attention back to the warmth. You feel a sense of immense gratitude for the layers of your clothing. Beneath the heavy velvet overgown, you wear a kirtle of fine, bleached linen. It is soft against your skin, having been washed many times in lye and lavender water. Beneath that is a chemise of even finer silk, a whisper of a garment that holds the heat of your body close to your limbs. Your legs are encased in thick woolen hose, dyed a deep forest green, held up by simple leather garters. The sheer volume of fabric makes every movement feel significant. To turn your head is to feel the brush of the collar against your neck. To shift your weight is to hear the rustle of the skirts as they slide over the rushes. You are a creature of layers, a series of shells protecting the core of your being from the frozen void outside. You think about the bread that will eventually arrive. You can almost taste the coarse grain, the slightly burnt crust that provides a bitter contrast to the soft, airy interior. You imagine the butter that will accompany it, churned only yesterday in the buttery, pale and salty and cold. When placed on a slice of warm bread, it will not melt instantly. It will soften slowly, losing its sharp edges, turning from a solid block into a translucent, golden pool. You dwell on this image for a long time. The slow transformation of butter on bread. It is a thought so simple, so devoid of conflict that it acts as a sedative for your mind. The fire is settling now. The initial flames have died down, leaving behind a massive bed of glowing coals. They are the color of a setting sun, a deep, pulsing crimson that seems to breathe. Occasionally, a small blue flame, the blue devils as the kitchen maids call them, dances atop a piece of charcoal, flickering for a few seconds before vanishing. You stare into the embers, and your eyes begin to lose their focus. The glowing landscape becomes a blur of warmth. You feel the heat on your face, drying your skin, making your eyelids feel heavy and thick. In the distance, very faint and muffled by the snow and the stone, you hear the tolling of the abbey bell. It is the hour of Compline, the final prayer of the day. The sound is a low, resonant thrum that vibrates more in your chest than in your ears. It is the sound of the world closing its eyes. The monks in their cold stone chapel will be chanting in a low, monotonous drone, Latin words that have been spoken in the same rhythm for hundreds of years. You imagine their voices rising like incense into the rafters, a steady stream of sound that anchors the night. You lean back in the chair, your head resting against the carved wood. The height of the chair provides a sense of security, sheltering your head and shoulders from any stray drafts. You are perfectly still. The only thing moving in the room is the slow, rhythmic rise and fall of your chest and the occasional flicker of the dying fire. The silence has become a physical presence, a warm blanket that you have pulled up to your chin. You are drifting now, suspended in the space between wakefulness and the first, shallow layers of sleep. The history of the kingdom, the power of the king, the cold of the winter, all of it has faded into the background. There is only the warmth, the scent of lavender and wood smoke, and the infinite, beautiful boredom of a night with no end. The heavy door at the far end of the solar remains shut. No one will disturb you. The candles have burned down by an inch, their flames steady and tall. The shadows on the wall are motionless. You find yourself focusing on a single spot on the stone wall, a place where the lime wash has flaked away to reveal the gray flint beneath. You study the shape of the flake. It looks like a small island in a white sea. You trace the coastline of this island in your mind, following every tiny indentation and jagged point. It is a journey of an inch, but in your current state, it feels as vast and significant as a voyage across the ocean. Your breathing slows even further. The air you inhale is warm and scented. The air you exhale is a soft sigh that disappears into the room. You are sinking. The chair, the stone, the wool, and the fire, they are all parts of a great, slow machine designed to carry you into the darkness of the night. You are ready to let go of the day. You are ready for the long, dreamless quiet that only a winter night can provide. The water clock drips, plink, the fire whispers, hiss, the snow falls, silence. The fire has shifted again, a heavy oak log settling deeper into the bed of glowing white ash with a muffled, dusty crunch. The sound is small, yet in the absolute stillness of the solar, it resonates like a drumbeat in a cathedral. You watch as a plume of fine, gray powder rises momentarily, caught in the thermal updraft, before being pulled away into the dark throat of the chimney. The room remains a sanctuary of amber light. The shadows have grown longer now, stretching across the floor to touch the hem of your gown, merging the dark velvet of your skirts with the dark grain of the oak floorboards. You find your attention drawn to the tactile reality of your immediate surroundings. You reach out a hand to the small table beside your chair. On it sits a bowl made of polished soapstone, cool and incredibly smooth to the touch. Inside the bowl are several dozen river pearls, unstrung and raw. These are not the perfect, blindingly white spheres of the Mediterranean. These are northern pearls, gathered from the cold silt of riverbeds. They are irregular, teardrop-shaped, and possess a soft, moonlight luster. You dip your fingers into the bowl. The pearls feel like frozen rain. You pick one up, holding it between your thumb and forefinger, and bring it close to the candle flame. The pearl's surface is a map of microscopic ridges and iridescent depths. As you rotate it slowly, the light slides over its curves, shifting from a pale cream to a faint, ghostly pink, then to a watery blue. There is a profound dullness in this observation that is deeply satisfying. You are not looking for flaws. You are simply witnessing the existence of the object. You listen to the sound they make as you let the pearl drop back into the bowl, a soft, clattering chime, like tiny teeth clicking together. You repeat the action, picking up a handful and letting them pour through your fingers. They are heavy for their size, a dense mineral weight. The repetition of the movement, the lifting, the pouring, the sound, creates a sensory loop that further anchors you in the present moment, far away from the complexities of the court. Beyond the circle of candlelight, the rest of the room remains in a state of suspended animation. The heavy wool tapestries on the walls act as a second skin for the tower, dampening any external noise. You think about the thickness of those hangings. They are woven with a density that makes them feel like solid wood. You can smell the faint, lingering scent of the dye, woad and madder, a dusty, vegetal smell that has lived in the fibers for years. If you were to press your face against the tapestry, you would feel the rough, honest texture of the wool, a tactile reminder of the thousands of hours of human labor required to create such a barrier against the cold. Your mind drifts to the kitchens, far below the tower, where the life of the manor continues in a similarly rhythmic fashion. Even at this late hour, a skeleton staff remains to tend the great hearth. You imagine the turnspit dog, curled in a nest of straw near the warmth, his breathing steady and slow. You think of the giant iron cauldrons, now scrubbed clean with sand and hung back on their hooks, their heavy bottoms still radiating a faint, residual heat. The kitchen would smell of scorched flour, rendered fat, and the sharp, acidic tang of vinegar used to clean the butcher's blocks. These are the logistical underpinnings of your life, the silent, invisible labor that ensures the fire in your room stays lit and the bread on your table stays warm. The thought of this order, this predictability, is like a heavy quilt settled over your thoughts. You turn your gaze back to the fire. It has reached a state of perfect equilibrium. The logs are no longer flaming, they are glowing from within, a translucent, crystalline red. You can see the structure of the wood, the rings of the tree, the veins of the bark, all preserved in fire. You find yourself tracing the patterns of the glowing wood. Here, a knot in the oak has turned into a bright, white-hot eye. There, a split in the grain looks like a river of liquid gold. You watch as a thin skin of silver ash forms over the most vibrant embers, a delicate veil that dims the light without reducing the heat. It is a slow, beautiful decay. The water clock in the corner continues its patient measurement of the night. Plink, plink. The sound is so regular that it begins to disappear into the background of your consciousness, only to re-emerge when you focus your ears. You decide to perform a small, mundane task to occupy the time. On the table is a small bundle of lavender sprigs, tied with a bit of rough twine. You take a small, sharp knife with a bone handle and begin to trim the stems. The knife is dull, requiring a deliberate, firm pressure. You feel the blade bite into the dry, woody stalks. Snip, snip. The sound is sharp and clean. As each stem is cut, a fresh burst of herbal scent is released into the air. A sharp, medicinal floral that clears your head and then immediately settles your nerves. You gather the trimmed sprigs and place them into a small silk satchel. This satchel will be tucked under your pillow, where the warmth of your head will release the scent throughout the night, ensuring dreams that are as gray and quiet as the winter sky. The act of filling the satchel is slow. You pick up each sprig individually, examining the tiny, dried florets. They are a dusty, muted purple, the color of a bruise or a late winter sunset. You count them as they go in. 1, 2, 3. By the time you reach 20, your hands are moving with a mechanical grace that requires no thought. Your mind is free to wander back to the snow outside. You imagine the silence of the courtyard. The wellhead would be capped with a perfect, rounded dome of snow, undisturbed by any bucket or rope. The stone steps leading to the chapel would be invisible, turned into a smooth, white ramp. The guards on the battlements would be wrapped in their heavy cloaks, their breaths forming thick, white clouds that vanish almost instantly into the freezing air. They would be standing as still as the statues in the niches of the great hall, their eyes fixed on the horizon where the black of the forest meets the black of the sky. The sheer cold of their world makes your own environment feel even more precious, a fragile bubble of warmth suspended in an ocean of ice. You feel a slight draft against your ankles, a reminder that even these walls are not entirely impermeable. You pull a heavy fur rug closer to your feet. It is the pelt of a great wolf, the hair thick and coarse, yet surprisingly soft. You bury your toes in the fur, feeling the immediate increase in temperature. The rug smells of old leather and the faint, musky scent of the animal it once was. You find yourself thinking about the wolf, running through the snow-choked forests, its paws leaving deep, rhythmic impressions in the white. Now it rests here, a silent guardian of your warmth. The candles have reached a point where the flame is deep within the translucent well of the wax. The light is softer now, diffused through the pale yellow walls of the candle itself. It casts a warm, buttery glow on the parchment and the ink you prepared. You pick up the quill, a large, sturdy feather from a swan's wing. The barbs of the feather are smooth and white, slightly oily to the touch. You don't write. You simply use the tip of the quill to trace the lines of the wood grain on the table. You follow a long, swirling curve that loops around a dark knot. Then you follow another, a straight path that runs the length of the board. The sensation of the quill tip dragging across the wood is almost silent, a ghostly vibration that travels up the shaft of the feather and into your hand. You are waiting for the arrival of your evening meal, but the waiting is not an anxious act. It is a passive state of being. You are like a stone in a wall or a log in the fire. You are simply existing in the space that has been provided for you. The hunger you feel is a low, distant hum, easily ignored in favor of the sensory richness of the room. You think about the baked apple that might be on the tray. You can almost feel the texture of the softened fruit, the way it would collapse under the slight pressure of a silver spoon. You imagine the steam rising from it, carrying the scent of cloves and burnt sugar. The shadows on the ceiling seem to be moving, but it is only the flickering of the dying candles. You watch a shadow that looks like a great, spreading tree. Its branches seem to grow as the candle flame dips, then retreat as the flame recovers. It is a slow, rhythmic expansion and contraction, like the breathing of the room itself. You find your own breath sinking with the movement of the shadow. Inhale. The shadow grows. Exhale. The shadow shrinks. Everything in this world is governed by these slow, natural cycles. The seasons, the fires, the candles, the breath. There is a profound safety in this predictability. Nothing sudden will happen. Nothing loud will break the silence. The king is in his chambers, the soldiers are in their barracks, and the world is buried under a foot of snow. You are alone, but you are not lonely. You are merely a part of the stillness. You pick up the silver goblet again. The spiced ale has cooled slightly, but it still radiates a gentle warmth. You take a very small sip. The liquid is thick and sweet, tasting of honey, nutmeg, and the sharp, bitter edge of hops. It coats your throat, a warm trail that moves slowly down into your chest. You hold the liquid in your mouth for a moment, feeling the complexity of the spices. It is a small, concentrated burst of flavor in a night of muted sensations. You set the goblet down, the metal base making a dull clink on the walnut table. The silence returns, deeper than before. You find yourself staring at the door, not with anticipation, but with a quiet observation of its construction. The heavy iron hinges are shaped like stylized dragons, their tails curving back to grip the wood. The iron is dark and pitted, showing the marks of the blacksmith's hammer. You think of the heat of the forge, the rhythmic striking of the hammer, cling, clang, cling, and how that violent, noisy birth resulted in this silent, steadfast object. The door is a barrier, a promise of privacy, a solid weight that separates your world from the infinite cold. You lean back further into the cushions. Your body feels heavy, as if you are being gently pressed into the chair by an invisible hand. The warmth of the room is like a physical presence, a soft, golden fog that has filled every corner. You are drifting closer to the edge of sleep, but you stay awake just a little longer, wanting to savor the absolute peace of the winter night. You are the keeper of the quiet, and the quiet is a vast, beautiful kingdom of its own. The silence of the tower has reached a new depth, a density that feels almost liquid, as if the room were submerged in a calm, dark sea. The water clock in the corner has just transitioned to a new hour, the leaden weight shifting with a subtle, mechanical click that is felt more than heard. You are still seated in the high-backed oak chair, your limbs feeling increasingly heavy, as though the very marrow of your bones has turned to lead. The heat from the hearth continues to radiate in steady, invisible waves, pressing against your skin like the touch of a warm palm. You turn your attention to the small, embroidered cushion resting on your lap. It is made of deep crimson silk, stitched with silver thread in the pattern of a briar rose. You begin to trace the embroidery with your fingertip. The silver thread is slightly raised, creating a textured path across the smooth silk. You follow the curve of a thorn, the delicate arc of a petal, the tight coil of a bud. The sensation is minute, a tiny, rhythmic friction against your skin. The silk itself is cool where the thread is absent, and warm where your hand has rested. You spend a long time on a single leaf, marveling at the repetitive nature of the stitches. Each one is a tiny, uniform horizontal line, placed with surgical precision by a seamstress whose name has been forgotten, but whose labor remains here, providing a quiet occupation for your wandering mind. Across the room, the laundry basket sits by the door, filled with the linens you intended to fold before the night truly took hold. You decide to attend to them now, moving with a deliberate, slow-motion grace. You stand up, and the rustle of your heavy wool skirt sounds like a distant waterfall in the quiet solar. You walk to the basket, each step cushioned by the thick rushes on the floor. The scent of the herbs, mint and dried meadowsweet, rises again, a faint, ghostly perfume that clings to the air. You reach into the basket and pull out a pillowcase made of fine, bleached flax. It is crisp and cool, smelling of the fresh air and the lye soap used in the wash house. You hold it by the corners and give it a gentle shake. The sound of the fabric snapping in the air is a sharp, clean report. You begin to fold. First, you bring the long edges together, smoothing the fabric with the flat of your hand to remove every wrinkle. You feel the grain of the flax, the tiny, natural irregularities in the weave that tell of the spinning wheel and the loom. Then you fold it again, creating a perfect square. You press down on the edges, ensuring they are sharp and neat. The task is profoundly monotonous. You repeat the process with a second pillowcase, then a third. Your movements are rhythmic and unhurried. There is no reason to rush. The night is long and the snow continues to fall outside, sealing you away from the world. You move on to the larger sheets. These require more effort as you have to stretch your arms wide to catch the edges. You walk the fabric toward yourself, folding it in halves, then quarters, then eighths. By the time you are finished, you have a neat, fragrant stack of white linen. You run your hand down the side of the stack, feeling the cold, smooth layers. It is a small monument to order and cleanliness, a silent testament to the domestic rhythms that persist even in the depths of winter. You return to your chair, the effort of folding the linens having left a pleasant, dull ache in your shoulders. You pick up a small, hand-carved wooden box from the side table. The wood is boxwood, yellow and dense, with a grain so fine it is almost invisible. The lid is held shut by a tiny brass latch. You flick the latch with your thumbnail, click, and open the box. Inside, resting on a bed of dark velvet, is a collection of dried orange slices, studded with whole cloves. These were prepared in the late autumn, meant to scent the air during the long months of darkness. You take one out. The orange slice is translucent, like a piece of stained glass, the sunlight of October preserved in its dried flesh. The cloves are dark and spiked, their heads like tiny, geometric crowns. You bring the slice to your nose and inhale deeply. The scent is a concentrated burst of winter, the sharp, acidic tang of the citrus tempered by the warm, numbing spice of the clove. It is a heavy, nostalgic smell that speaks of hearth fires and celebration, but here, in the quiet of the solar, it is merely another sensory detail to be catalogued. You hold the slice between your fingers, feeling its brittle texture. It is light, almost weightless, yet it holds so much sensory information. You place it back in the box and close the lid, the brass latch snapping shut with that same satisfying click. The fire has burned down further, the logs now reduced to thick cylinders of glowing charcoal. The heat has changed. It is no longer a bright, flickering warmth, but a deep, penetrating glow that seems to reach into the very stones of the tower. You watch a single ember as it slowly dims. It turns from a bright orange to a dull red, then to a dark, chalky purple, before finally being coated in a thin layer of white ash. It is a slow, silent death, a miniature drama that plays out over the course of several minutes. You find yourself mesmerized by the process, your own internal clock slowing down to match the rhythm of the cooling wood. You think about the king's horses in the stables below. They would be standing in their stalls, their coats thick and shaggy for the winter, their breaths rising in steady plumes of steam into the cold rafters. You imagine the sound of them shifting their weight in the straw, a heavy, muffled thud, and the rhythmic grinding of their teeth as they chew on dried hay. The stable would smell of horsehair, old leather, and the sweet, dusty scent of the hayloft. Like you, the horses are in a state of winter dormancy, their great strength stilled by the season. The image of the silent, breathing stable adds another layer to your sense of peace. The entire manor, from the highest tower to the lowest stall, is wrapped in the same blanket of quiet. The candles have burned low enough that the wax is now overflowing the pewter holders, pooling on the walnut table in flat, irregular shapes. You watch as a fresh drop of molten wax rolls down the side of the candle. It moves slowly, a thick, translucent bead that pauses occasionally before continuing its descent. When it reaches the table, it spreads out, losing its heat and turning opaque in a matter of seconds. You reach out and touch the newly hardened wax. It is soft and slightly tacky, yielding to the pressure of your finger. You press your fingerprint into it, creating a tiny, temporary seal. The wax is the color of old parchment, a dull, creamy white that reflects the dying light of the fire. A soft sound draws your attention to the door. It is not the knock of a servant, but the scratching of a small hound on the other side. You rise and open the door just a crack. A small gray whippet, wrapped in a coat of quilted wool, slips into the room. It does not bark or jump. It simply trots to the hearth and circles 3 times before collapsing onto the wolfskin rug. The dog's presence adds a new element of comfort to the room. You watch the rhythmic rise and fall of its flanks as it immediately falls into a deep sleep. Its paws twitch occasionally, perhaps dreaming of a summer chase through the high grass, but here, it is a silent, warm statue. You sit back down, feeling the dog's warmth radiating from the floor. You pick up a piece of smooth, unworked amber that you keep in your pocket. It is a large, irregular lump, the color of honey and sunlight. You rub it between your palms, the friction creating a faint, resinous scent and a static charge that makes the fine hairs on your arms stand up. The amber is millions of years old, a piece of ancient sap that has outlasted empires and ice ages. To hold it is to hold a piece of frozen time. You look through the amber at the firelight. The world becomes a blur of golden light and dark shadows, a liquid landscape that shifts as you tilt the stone. The water clock drips again, plink. The sound is a reminder that the night is progressing, however slowly. You realize that you have been sitting in the same position for a long time, yet your body does not feel stiff. Instead, it feels fluid, as if you are beginning to merge with the furniture and the air. The boundary between your physical self and the room is blurring. You are the warmth of the fire. You are the scent of the lavender. You are the silence of the falling snow. You decide to prepare your bed for the night, though you are not yet ready to climb into it. You walk to the alcove and pull back the heavy fur rugs. The sheets beneath are made of fine silk, dyed a deep midnight blue. You run your hand over the silk. It is incredibly smooth, almost slippery, a sharp contrast to the rough wool of your gown. You take a heavy brass warming pan filled with hot coals from the hearth and slide it between the sheets. You move the pan back and forth in long, rhythmic strokes, feeling the weight of the brass and the heat it transfers to the bed. The sound of the pan sliding over the silk is a soft, metallic shush, a soothing noise that promises a warm sanctuary when you finally decide to sleep. As you work, you think about the logistics of the morning. The servants will rise before the sun, their footsteps hushed as they move through the cold corridors. They will bring fresh wood for the fires, scrape the frost from the windows, and begin the long process of preparing the morning meal. But that is hours away. Between now and then lies the vast, empty territory of the night. You finish warming the bed and set the pan aside on the stone hearth. The bed is now a pocket of intense heat, waiting to envelop you. You return to your chair for one last moment of contemplation. The room is now very dark, lit only by the low glow of the embers and the stump of a single candle. The shadows have taken over completely, turning the familiar furniture into strange, sculptural shapes. You feel a sense of profound safety in this darkness. It is not an empty void, but a protective layer that hides you from the world. You close your eyes, and the sound of the wind outside seems to recede, replaced by the steady, calm beating of your own heart. You are drifting, sinking, fading into the beautiful, monotonous peace of the winter tower. The whippet sighs in its sleep. The last candle flicker dies. The room is a temple of warmth. The deep heart of the night has arrived, that profound and weightless hour where the distinction between the stone of the walls and the air of the room seems to dissolve. The solar is now lit only by the low, visceral pulse of the embers. This light is no longer golden. It has matured into a somber, rhythmic crimson that touches the undersides of the oak beams and casts the rest of the room into a protective, velvet gloom. You remain in the stillness, your body having reached a state of such complete relaxation that the simple act of breathing feels like a slow, deliberate luxury. Your attention settles on a small object you have carried from the table back to your chair. A heavy, silver thimble, etched with tiny, microscopic patterns of ivy leaves. You don't intend to sew. The needle and thread are far away in their wooden casket. Instead, you simply slide the thimble onto your finger. It is cold, a sharp, sudden bite of frozen metal that quickly begins to steal the warmth from your skin. You press the tip of the thimble against the wooden arm of the chair. You feel the grain of the oak through the silver, a faint, ghost-like vibration. You move your finger in a slow, circular motion, listening to the almost imperceptible scritch-scritch of metal on wood. It is a dry, thin sound, the sound of a winter insect or a dry leaf skittering across a stone floor. You find yourself contemplating the ceiling. High above, where the candlelight no longer reaches, the shadows are thick and ancient. You imagine the dust that has settled there over the decades, fine gray particles of history, skin, and wood smoke. It is a silent, accumulating weight that no one ever sees. The thought of that undisturbed dust is strangely comforting. It represents a lack of disturbance, a continuity of existence that requires no intervention. You watch a single thread of spiderweb, caught in a stray current of air from the chimney, as it glints for a split second in the ember light before vanishing back into the dark. It sways with a hypnotic, pendulum-like regularity, marking a time that has nothing to do with the world of men. The air in the room has grown slightly heavier, saturated with the smell of the cooling wax and the deep, resinous scent of the oak logs. You reach for a small bowl of dried pomegranate seeds sitting on the low stool. They are dark, shriveled, and hard as garnets. You take one and press it between your thumb and forefinger. It does not break. It is a stubborn, leathery little bead. You think about the fruit it came from, the heavy, sun-drenched weight of a Mediterranean autumn, worlds away from this frozen tower. The contrast between the origin of the seed and its current, silent resting place in a winter castle is a vast, boring distance that you traverse in your mind, mile by mile, over frozen seas and snow-choked mountain passes. The small whippet by the fire shifts in its sleep. Its velvet ears twitch, and it lets out a long, shuddering sigh that ends in a soft whistle through its nose. The sound is incredibly fragile. It underscores the silence of the room rather than breaking it. You watch the dog's ribs expand and contract, a perfect, rhythmic machinery of life. You find your own pulse slowing down to match the dog's, a synchronized heartbeat of the tower. There is no conflict here, no desire to be anywhere else. The snow outside has likely reached the height of the lower windows by now, a white wall that seals the kingdom into a state of frozen grace. You decide to engage in a task of extreme slowness, the unwinding of a silk ribbon. The ribbon is a deep, bruised plum color, wrapped tightly around a spool of polished bone. You take the end of the silk and begin to pull inch by inch. The silk makes no sound as it slides over the bone, but you can feel the slight tactile resistance, the microscopic friction of the fibers. As the ribbon uncoils, it falls in soft, shimmering loops onto your lap. The light from the embers catches the sheen of the fabric, creating a liquid, metallic effect. You observe how the ribbon holds the shape of the spool for a moment before relaxing into a limp, elegant curve. You spend several minutes on each foot of silk. You examine the weave, looking for the tiny, inevitable inconsistencies of the handloom. Here, a thread is slightly thicker. There, the dye has taken a fraction more deeply. These are not flaws to be corrected, but details to be observed. When the entire ribbon is unwound, it lies across your knees like a pool of dark water. Then, with equal deliberation, you begin to wind it back up. You ensure that each layer is perfectly flat, that the edges align with the precision of a manuscript margin. This is a closed loop of activity, a task that produces nothing and changes nothing, yet it provides a profound sense of tectonic peace. Your mind drifts toward the concept of the castle's foundations. You imagine the massive blocks of gray granite, sunk deep into the frozen earth, holding up the weight of the stone walls and the heavy lead roof. The foundations are indifferent to the winter. They exist in a world of perpetual dark and cold, unmoved by the fire in the solar or the snow in the courtyard. You feel a kinship with that stone, solid, patient, and utterly still. You imagine yourself as part of the architecture, a living fixture of the room, as much a part of the tower as the chimney or the window slits. The water clock makes a subtle, hollow sound, a bubble of air rising through the leaden pipe. Glug. It is a sudden, wet sound in a room of dry textures. You wait for it to happen again, but it doesn't. The clock returns to its steady plink, plink, plink. You count 60 drops, marking a minute of your life that was spent doing absolutely nothing but listening. It was a perfect minute. It was a minute where the world stood still, where the king's mistress was not a woman of status or desire, but simply a witness to the passage of water and time. You think about the ink you made earlier. It will be sitting in the mortar, the surface tension creating a slight dark dome. By now, a thin skin might have begun to form on the top, a microscopic layer of drying pigment. You imagine the blackness of that ink. It is the blackness of the night outside, the blackness of the forest, the blackness of the sleep that is slowly, inexorably approaching. You don't need to write with it. The ink exists, and that is enough. The record of the day is already written in the ash of the fire and the folds of the linens. A movement at the window catches your eye. A small clump of snow, having grown too heavy on the stone ledge outside, has slid off. You didn't hear it fall, but you saw the sudden absence of its shape against the dark glass. You imagine it falling through the air, a silent white weight, before landing with a soft thud on the drift below. This is the only event that has happened in the last hour. It is a significant event. It is a change in the landscape. You dwell on the physics of the sliding snow, the way the friction gave way, the way gravity took hold, the way the air cushioned its descent. The warmth of the room is beginning to make your head feel heavy. You lean your temple against the high back of the chair. The wood is cool and hard, a stabilizing force. You close your eyes and the world of the solar remains vivid in your mind. You can see the glow of the embers, the curve of the silk ribbon, the silhouette of the sleeping dog. These images are etched into the back of your eyelids, glowing with a soft, persistent light. You are safe. You are warm. You are beautifully, wonderfully bored. You think about the king. He is likely asleep in his great bed, surrounded by heavy furs and the silence of his own chambers. He is a man of wars and laws, but tonight he is just another soul seeking shelter from the frost. You feel a distant, muted affection for him, not the sharp passion of the summer, but a quiet winter companionship. You are both parts of the same machine, both huddling against the same cold. But here in your tower, you have the better part of the night. You have the solitude. You have the silence. The fire gives one last, soft pop, and a single spark travels a few inches into the air before vanishing. You watch the spot where it was, waiting for another, but the embers are settling into a deeper sleep. The light is fading, the crimson turning to a dark, smoky violet. The room is preparing itself for the final hours of the night, and you are preparing with it. Your limbs feel like they are made of the same stone as the walls, immobile, heavy, and cool. You reach out and touch the wolfskin rug with the toe of your slipper. The fur is thick and dense, a forest of animal hair that has seen 1,000 winters. You find yourself imagining the life of the hair itself, how it grew, how it protected, how it now serves as a soft barrier between you and the floor. Everything has a purpose, even if that purpose is simply to exist and provide comfort. You are content to be a part of this web of existence. The silence is now absolute. Even the wind seems to have died down, leaving the tower suspended in a vacuum of peace. You are ready to move toward the bed, but the transition feels too sudden. You stay in the chair for a few more minutes, savoring the final, lingering heat of the fire. You are the king's mistress, the keeper of the tower, the witness of the snow. And as the night deepens, you are the first to truly understand the beauty of the boring, the hypnotic power of the mundane, and the profound safety of a world that has finally, mercifully, fallen asleep. The hour of the wolf has arrived, that deepest, most hollow point of the night where the world feels as though it has forgotten the sun ever existed. In the solar, the embers have retreated under a thick, insulating blanket of silver-white ash. The glow is no longer a pulse. It is a steady, subterranean hum of heat that barely stains the darkness with a bruised, ghostly copper. The air has stilled to a point of absolute stasis. If a single feather were to fall from the ceiling, it would take an eternity to reach the rushes. So unmoving is the atmosphere within these stone walls. You find yourself focused on the simple mechanics of your own hands. In the dim light, you lift your left hand and turn it slowly, observing the way the shadows pool in the palm and then spill over the knuckles. The skin is pale, the texture fine and dry from the warmth of the room. You trace the faint blue veins beneath the surface of your wrist, branching paths that look like the rivers on a map of a distant, peaceful province. There is a profound, rhythmic dullness in watching the blood move unseen, a slow and silent tide that keeps time with the water clock. You spend many minutes merely alternating which hand rests on top of the other, feeling the slight weight of your fingers as they settle into the velvet of your skirts. On the table sits a small, shallow bowl of dried lentils, placed there earlier for some forgotten kitchen task. You reach out and pick up a single lentil. It is a tiny, hard disc, the color of a dusty road. You roll it between your forefinger and thumb. It is smooth, slightly convex, and entirely unyielding. You drop it back into the bowl. Tink. The sound is sharp, miniature, and perfectly solitary. You pick up another. This one has a small chip in its edge, a microscopic flaw in its humble geometry. You spend a long time searching the bowl for another with the same marking, moving the seeds one by one from the left side of the bowl to the right. The sound of them sliding against the ceramic, a dry, slithering shush, is the only music in the room. Your thoughts drift to the architecture of the chimney. You imagine the soot that has accumulated on the stones inside the flue, a soft, black fur made of the ghosts of 1,000 oak logs. It is a hidden landscape of carbon, rising up through the heart of the tower to the freezing air above. You think about the thickness of the mortar between the stones, a mixture of lime, sand, and water that has hardened into something as permanent as the earth itself. The stability of the tower is a physical sensation. You feel it in the way the floor remains perfectly level beneath you, a solid platform in a world of shifting snow. To your right, the large tapestry depicting the summer harvest seems to have lost all its depth. In this low light, it is merely a dark, heavy mass of woven wool. You imagine the sheep that provided the fleece, sturdy, thick-coated animals grazing on the dales of Derbyshire. You think about the process of carding the wool, the repetitive motion of the metal combs pulling the tangled fibers into straight, orderly rows. The monotony of the labor is preserved in the fabric. You feel the weight of those thousands of hours of carding, spinning, and dyeing. It is a heavy, comforting history that hangs against the cold stone, a barrier made of time and patience. You notice a small brass oil lamp on the mantel, currently unlit. You observe the way the faint ember light catches the curve of the spout. The brass is tarnished, showing a dull, greenish patina in the crevices of the decorative scrollwork. You imagine the oil inside, thick, golden seed oil, viscous and slow-moving. If you were to light it, the flame would be a tiny, unwavering bead of gold, consuming the oil drop by drop. But you do not light it. The darkness is a shroud of safety, and you prefer the honesty of the dying fire. The lamp remains a silent, metallic spectator to your boredom. The whippet on the rug has moved in its sleep, stretching its long, thin legs until the claws click softly against the stone hearth. It lets out a muffled woof in its throat, a dream sound that never reaches the air. You watch the dog's chest. The fur there is white and soft as milk. You count the breaths. 1, 2, 3. Each breath is a small victory over the winter. The dog is a closed system of warmth, a living furnace fueled by the scraps of the king's table and the peace of the solar. You find a strange, hypnotic pleasure in the fact that the dog has no concept of the year, the king, or the frost. It only knows the heat and the rug. You think about the water in the well in the center of the courtyard. It is deep, sunk far below the frost line. The water there is black and still, reflecting nothing but the circle of the sky far above. You imagine a single bucket, frozen to the winch, its wood bleached gray by the elements. The stillness of that water is a mirror of your own state. You are deep, dark, and unmoved by the wind that continues to scour the battlements. The world could end tonight in a flurry of white, and you would remain here, a quiet inhabitant of the stone. The scent of the room has shifted. The lavender and mint have faded into the background, replaced by the more primitive smell of cold stone and the faint, acidic tang of the cooling ink in the mortar. You pick up the mortar and tilt it. The ink moves like treacle, a slow black wave that clings to the sides of the stone bowl. You observe the way the light reflects off the liquid, a sharp, thin line of copper from the embers. You spend a long time watching the ink settle back into a perfect, level pool. It is a small lesson in gravity and equilibrium. Your gaze travels to the door. You think about the hallway beyond, a long, vaulted gallery of cold stone and flickering torches. The air there would be sharp, smelling of damp and tallow. You imagine the silence of the gallery, broken only by the occasional pop of a torch or the scurrying of a mouse behind the wainscoting. But that world is separate from yours. Between you and the gallery is 2 inches of solid oak and a heavy iron bolt. You are in the heart of the tower, the innermost chamber of a stone shell. The isolation is a physical comfort, like a heavy cloak wrapped around your soul. You reach into the folds of your sleeve and find a small wooden rosary. The beads are made of olive wood, smoothed by years of being rubbed between fingers. You do not pray. Instead, you count the beads one by one, feeling the grain of the wood and the small, hand-carved notches. Each bead is a second, a moment of the night captured and released. 1, 2, 3. The beads are warm from the heat of your body. They feel like small wooden pulses in your palm. By the time you reach the cross at the end, you have forgotten where you started. You begin again. The wind outside has found a new frequency. It is no longer a howl, but a high, thin whistle as it passes through a tiny gap in the lead cames of the window. It is a lonely sound, a reminder of the vast, uninhabited spaces of the moor. You listen to the pitch of the whistle. It rises and falls, a mournful, musical thread that weaves through the silence of the solar. You find yourself swaying slightly to the rhythm of the wind, your body becoming a part of the tower's acoustic landscape. You think about the chests of clothes in the corner. Inside are gowns of heavy brocade, kirtles of fine wool, and veils of translucent silk. Each garment is folded with dried rosemary and peppercorns to ward off moths. You imagine the dark interior of the chest, a world of folded fabric and quiet shadows. The clothes are waiting for a morning that feels 1,000 years away. They are resting, just as you are. The thought of all that folded silk and wool adds to the sense of density in the room. The water clock drips, plink. The sound is slightly deeper now as the water level in the lower basin has risen. You notice the change in tone. It is a significant observation. You dwell on the physics of acoustics, how the volume of the water alters the resonance of the lead. You spend several minutes anticipating the next drop, trying to predict the exact microsecond it will hit the surface. This is the height of your intellectual engagement with the world. It is enough. You feel a profound sense of gratitude for the heaviness of your own eyelids. They feel like two leaden shutters slowly closing over the windows of your soul. You do not fight the weight. You lean your head back against the carved wood of the chair, feeling the cool pressure against your scalp. The room is a blur of dark violet and soft copper. The fire is a memory. The dog is a shadow. The snow is a myth. You are the king's mistress, but you are also a stone in the wall, a thread in the tapestry, a drop of water in the clock. You are dissolving into the monotony of the winter night. The silence is no longer something you hear. It is something you are. You are the quiet at the center of the storm, the warmth at the heart of the frost. The night is a long, dark corridor, and you are walking down it with slow, silent steps toward a sleep that is as deep and unchanging as the stones of Mercia. The last of the oak galls in the mortar settles. The wind finds a lower note. The tower breathes with you. The solar has entered the state of the deep freeze, that specific hour of the night where the external temperature has dropped so low that the stone walls begin to emit a faint, mineral scent of ancient dust and lime. The fire is now a graveyard of white ash, with only a few stubborn, ruby-tinged veins of heat pulsing beneath the surface. This is the hour of the monochrome. The vibrant oranges and ambers of the early evening have retreated, leaving behind a world composed of 1,000 shades of charcoal, slate, and bone. You remain in your chair, a statue of wool and silk, observing the slow-motion choreography of the fading light. Your gaze settles upon a small, pewter bowl on the table, which contains a handful of dried sea salt. This salt was brought by caravan from the southern coast, a remnant of a summer sea now trapped in crystalline form. You reach out and take a small pinch between your fingers. The grains are coarse and angular, like microscopic shards of glass. You rub them together, listening to the dry, gritty friction, a sound like the very beginning of a landslide, occurring on a scale of millimeters. You watch the white grains fall back into the bowl, hitting the metal surface with a series of tiny, metallic tinks. You repeat the action, fascinated by the way the salt clings to the oils of your skin before being shaken loose. It is a slow, sterile, and entirely pointless exercise. You find yourself thinking about the ceiling beams again. They are made of hartavok, timbers that were already old when the foundations of this tower were laid. You imagine the sap that once flowed through them, now replaced by the dry, still air of the solar. You trace the cracks in the wood, the shakes, that have opened up over centuries of seasoning. Each crack is a dark line, a jagged canyon in a landscape of timber. You imagine a microscopic traveler navigating those canyons, moving through the silent, dark interior of the beam. The scale of your thoughts has shrunk until the room feels like an entire universe, and a single oak beam feels like a mountain range. To the left of the hearth stands a heavy wrought iron stand holding a set of fire tools. You focus on the poker. It is a long, utilitarian rod of dark metal, its handle twisted into a simple decorative spiral. You observe the transition of the iron's color, from the matte black of the handle to the scorched, silver gray of the tip that has spent the night in the heart of the fire. You think about the molecular structure of the iron, how the heat has expanded and contracted the metal, subtly changing it with every fire. The poker is resting now, leaning against the stone, its work done. You feel a strange empathy for the tool, a silent, heavy object that has fulfilled its purpose and now seeks only the stillness of the corner. The whippet on the rug has curled itself into an even tighter ball, its nose tucked under its tail to conserve the last of its body heat. The rhythmic rising of its side has slowed to a crawl. You watch the dog's whiskers, which are fine as silk threads. Occasionally, they vibrate, caught in a stray draft that has wandered in from the spiral staircase. You imagine the draft's journey, up from the damp, freezing cellars, through the great hall where the embers of the main hearth are dying, past the sleeping guards, and finally through the gap beneath your door. The draft is a cold messenger from the rest of the castle, reminding you that your warmth is an anomaly, a small, defied law of nature. You think about the supply of tallow in the chandlery, thousands of candles, dipped and cooled, hanging from wooden racks like pale, frozen ghosts. You imagine the smell of the rendered fat, heavy, animalistic, and dull. You think about the hands that dipped them, the repetitive motion of lowering the wicks into the melted wax, then lifting them to cool over and over until the candle reached the required thickness. The entire castle is built on these loops of repetitive labor. The weaver at the loom, the smith at the anvil, the mistress in her tower. Each life is a series of slow, rhythmic tasks that stack up like the stones of the walls. The thought is not depressing. It is stabilizing. It means that tomorrow will be exactly like today. You reach for a small, leather-bound book that has been resting on your lap. It is not a book of poetry or history, but a household ledger. You open it to a random page. The parchment is thick and yellowed, the edges curled like dried leaves. You look at the columns of figures written in a cramped, scholarly hand. 3 bushels of malt, 2 stone of wool, a peck of salt. You read the words over and over, letting the mundane vocabulary wash over you. The words have no emotional weight. They are merely labels for physical things. You find a deep, hypnotic rhythm in the list. You imagine the malt in its sacks, the wool in its bales, the salt in its jars. The world is a collection of neatly labeled containers, and you are the overseer of the inventory. The window remains a black void, but you notice that the frost on the inner surface of the glass has grown. It has formed intricate fern-like patterns that creep across the panes. You watch a single leaf of frost. It is composed of thousands of tiny, crystalline needles, all aligned in a perfect, geometric frozen fractal. You observe the way the faint light from the room catches the edges of the ice, turning it into a shimmering, silver forest. The frost is growing in real time, a slow, silent invasion of the cold. You find yourself rooting for the frost, wanting to see it cover the entire window, sealing you even more deeply into your stone cocoon. You think about the bread dough that must be rising in the kitchens by now. It would be sitting in large wooden troughs covered with heavy linen cloths. You imagine the yeast working in the dark, a slow, microscopic fermentation that causes the dough to heave and swell. You think about the texture of the dough, tacky, soft, and smelling of damp grain. In a few hours, the bakers will punch it down, a heavy, rhythmic kneading that will echo through the quiet lower floors. But for now, the dough is rising in silence, a slow expansion that mirrors the falling of the snow outside. The water clock has reached a point where the drip has slowed. You realize the upper reservoir is nearly empty. The intervals between the plinks have stretched. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You count the seconds of silence. The silence is getting longer. Soon the clock will stop altogether and the measurement of time will cease. You look forward to that moment, the final, absolute end of the hour. You want to exist in a space where time is no longer a sequence of drops, but a single, frozen lake of existence. You feel the weight of your own clothing as a profound burden of comfort. The heavy velvet of your gown, the layers of linen and silk, the thick woolen hose, they are all pressing against you, reminding you of your physical boundaries. You feel the heat of your own body trapped within the fabric, a small, private climate that you carry with you. You shift your weight slightly, and the sound of the velvet rubbing against the oak chair is a low, muffled groan. It is the only sound you have made in a long time. It feels significant, a declaration of your presence in the dark. Your mind wanders to the king's crown, resting on a velvet cushion in the royal treasury. You imagine the coldness of the gold, the hardness of the gems. It is a heavy, uncomfortable thing, a symbol of a world that requires constant action and decision. You are glad you are not wearing it. You are glad your only crown is the silence of the tower, and your only scepter is the bone-handled knife on the table. You are the mistress of nothing but the present moment, and that is a far greater kingdom. The air in the room is now so still that you can hear the sound of your own eyelashes as you blink, a tiny, wet click. You focus on that sound. You blink slowly, deliberately, listening for the microscopic noise. Click, click, click. It is the smallest sound in the world. You find yourself entranced by it, a tiny biological clock ticking away the seconds of your life. You look at the silver goblet again. A thin film has formed on the surface of the leftover ale, a shimmering skin of proteins and sugars. You tilt the goblet and watch the film stretch and ripple, but it does not break. It is a tiny, liquid landscape, reflecting the gray-white ash of the hearth. You spend several minutes exploring the topography of the film, watching the way it catches the light. The night is no longer a duration, it is a location. You are standing in the middle of it, and there is no way out but through the passage of the hours. But you are in no hurry to leave. The boredom has become a form of ecstasy, a quiet, heavy joy that comes from the total absence of demand. You are a king's mistress, a woman of history, but right now, you are just a breathing form in a dark room, waiting for the water clock to die and the frost to finish its work on the glass. The whippet exhales a tiny puff of breath. The frost adds another needle to its fern. The silence deepens until it rings in your ears. The deep, hollow core of the night has stretched into a state of absolute equilibrium. Time, measured by the dying heat of the hearth and the thickening frost on the glass, has lost its linear quality. The solar is no longer a room. It is a heavy, stone-lined vessel for the preservation of stillness. The air is cool on your forehead but warm against your heavy, wool-draped limbs, creating a gentle sensory dissonance that makes your head feel light and your body feel as if it were sinking into the very grain of the oak chair. You turn your attention to a small, silver sewing box that rests upon the walnut table. You have no intention of mending anything, but the tactile ritual of examining its contents is a soothing necessity. You lift the lid. The hinges emit a thin, metallic protest, a tiny, high-pitched creak that seems to hang in the silent air for seconds after the movement has stopped. Inside, the box is lined with faded blue velvet, the pile worn down in spots to the base threads. You look at the pins stuck into a small, heart-shaped cushion. They are made of polished brass, their heads rounded and smooth. You pull one out. It is surprisingly heavy for its size. You spend a long time observing the point of the pin, which glints with a sharp, cold light from the remaining embers. You gently touch the tip to the pad of your thumb. You don't press hard enough to break the skin. You simply feel the infinitesimal point of contact, a microscopic, sharp reality in a world of soft, blurred shadows. Beside the pins is a small wooden spool of silk thread. The silk is a pale, ghostly cream, wound with such precision that the surface of the spool looks like a solid, translucent cylinder. You find the end of the thread and begin to unwind it, an inch at a time. The thread is so fine it is almost invisible in the gloom, yet you can feel its cool, slippery trail across your palm. As you pull, the spool rotates on its spindle with a soft, rhythmic work-click, work-click. You watch the pile of silk grow on your lap, a tangled, weightless cloud that looks like a fallen piece of the winter sky. The act of unwinding the silk is a journey of pure repetition. Your fingers move with a slow, mechanical grace, unhurried by the knowledge that you will eventually have to wind it all back up again. You think about the stone walls that surround you. You imagine the millions of tiny air pockets trapped within the limestone, microscopic bubbles of an atmosphere that existed millions of years ago. To be inside this tower is to be encased in the deep history of the earth. You feel the immense weight of the battlements above you, hundreds of tons of rock and lead pressing down, held up by the strength of the arches and the stubbornness of the mortar. This weight provides a sense of profound security. It is as if you are at the bottom of a deep, calm well, where the storms of the surface can only reach you as the faintest of whispers. Your gaze wanders to the floor, where a single dried leaf of meadowsweet has escaped the woven rushes and lies upon a flagstone. It is a tiny skeletal remains, the color of old parchment. You watch it for a long time. A draft from the base of the door catches it, and the leaf performs a slow, scraping dance across the stone. Scritch, scritch. It is the sound of the world's smallest ghost. The leaf moves an inch, stops, and then turns a slow circle before settling into a new crack in the floor. You find yourself waiting for the next breath of air to move it. Your entire consciousness narrowed down to the fate of a piece of dried vegetation. Beyond the door, in the long, cold gallery, you imagine the shadows of the suits of armor. They stand like hollow sentinels, their steel surfaces coated in a fine layer of winter condensation. You think about the silence inside the helmets, a dark, airless space where no one speaks and no one breathes. The contrast between the cold, empty armor in the hall and your own warm, breathing presence in the solar is a source of quiet comfort. You are the spark of life at the center of a dormant fortress. You pull the wolfskin rug higher over your knees, the coarse hair brushing against the velvet of your gown with a sound like a low, dry sigh. The whippet on the rug has begun to dream. Its paws twitch rhythmically, as if it were trotting through a field of summer clover. It lets out a tiny, high-pitched whimper, a sound so small it wouldn't wake a bird. You watch the dog's eyelids, which are thin and veined like the petals of a flower. You feel a deep, maternal peace in watching the animal's vulnerability. In this room, at this hour, everything is safe. The king's mistress is not a figure of scandal or power. She is merely a guardian of the quiet, a witness to the dreams of a small hound. You reach for the pewter bowl of salt again. You take a single, large crystal and place it on your tongue. You do not chew it. You simply let it sit there, a cold, sharp intrusion. You feel the salt slowly begin to dissolve, the sharp edges softening as it reacts to the warmth of your mouth. The flavor is intense, mineral, oceanic, and ancient. It is the taste of the earth's tears. As the crystal shrinks, your focus intensifies on the shrinking point of contact. Finally, it vanishes, leaving behind only a lingering, dry tingle. This tiny chemical process is the most dramatic event of the last half hour. You savor the lack of consequence. The frost on the window has reached the center of the pane. It has formed a pattern that looks like the branch of a fir tree, complete with individual needles and a dusting of crystalline snow. You imagine the silence on the other side of that glass. The snow would be falling so thickly now that you wouldn't be able to see the ground from the battlements. It would be a world of white on white, a total erasure of the landscape. The trees, the roads, the villages, all gone, hidden beneath the uniform, cold blanket of the winter. The thought of that vast, empty whiteness makes the interior of the tower feel even smaller, even more concentrated. You are in a jewelry box of heat and shadow. You think about the oil in the lamps in the great hall. By now, most of them will have sputtered and died, leaving behind only the smell of charred wicks and cold brass. You imagine the last few drops of oil being drawn up through the cotton, the flame turning a deep, desperate blue before finally vanishing into a thin curl of smoke. The extinction of the lights is a slow, orderly process, a gradual surrender to the night. You are one of the few souls still awake to witness the darkness's final victory. You pick up the quill again, the swan feather catching the dim light. You don't dip it in the ink. Instead, you use the dry tip to trace the outline of your own shadow on the table. The shadow is large and blurred, a dark silhouette cast by the dying fire. You follow the curve of your shoulder, the line of your neck, the slight peak of your headdress. As the embers shift, your shadow moves and you have to adjust your tracing. It is a slow, silent game of pursuit. You are chasing a ghost made of light and absence. The water clock has finally reached its limit. The last drop of water hangs from the lead pipe, a glistening, heavy orb that refuses to fall. You watch it with bated breath. The drop stretches, turning into a teardrop shape. It shivers, caught in the tension of its own surface. And then with a final, muted plink, it falls. The clock is now silent. The mechanical heartbeat of the room has stopped. You feel a strange sense of relief. Time has officially ceased to exist. You are now in the timeless interval, the space between the end of the night and the beginning of the day. You lean back, your head finding the same comfortable spot on the oak chair's high back. Your breathing is so shallow and slow that you can barely feel the movement of your chest. The warmth of the room has become a physical weight, a soft, golden pressure that is pushing you down into the cushions. Your eyelids are no longer heavy. They are simply closed, the transition from the dark room to the darkness of your own mind having occurred without you even noticing. You think about the king's mistress. She is a woman of silk and secrets, a woman who moves through the corridors of power with a quiet, practiced grace. But here, in the dark, she is just a woman who is very, very tired. She is a woman who has counted the grains of salt and unwound the spool of silk. She is a woman who has won the battle against the winter by simply being still. The fire gives a final, almost silent crackle, a sound like the breaking of a dry twig in a forest miles away. A single, tiny spark rises from the ash, travels an inch toward the ceiling and vanishes. It is the last light. The room is now a sanctuary of total, velvety gloom. You are safe. You are warm. You are beautifully, perfectly bored. The whippet sighs and settles deeper into the rug. The frost completes its forest on the glass. The night holds its breath. The silence in the solar has reached its absolute zenith. It is now so profound that it has a texture, a soft, granular quality like falling soot. The embers in the hearth have transitioned from a living red to a deep, skeletal violet, buried beneath a thick, insulating blanket of silver-white ash. The air is perfectly stratified. A layer of cooling air hugs the floor, while a lingering, aromatic warmth remains suspended around your shoulders. You have moved beyond the sensation of time. In this frozen tower, in the year 1242, the world has effectively ceased to turn. Your hands, resting motionless on the velvet of your lap, have become objects of study once more. You focus on the sensation of your own pulse in your fingertips. It is a slow, rhythmic thrumming, a tiny internal clock that is the only thing marking the passage of the seconds. You take a small, polished piece of jet from the table, a stone of concentrated darkness, cold and dense. You hold it in your palm and close your fingers over it. The stone is a vacuum of heat, slowly drawing the warmth from your skin. You observe the process with a detached, clinical interest. You feel the cold of the stone travel up your arm, a thin, silver thread of sensation that grounds you in the physical reality of the winter. You look toward the corner of the room where a heavy, iron-bound chest of cedarwood sits. Inside that chest, are the summer tapestries and the lighter linens of the spring. You think about the smell of the cedar, sharp, resinous, and clean. You imagine the darkness inside the chest, a space where no light has entered for months. The objects inside are in a state of perfect hibernation. They are not waiting, they simply are. You find a deep, resonant peace in the thought of those folded fabrics, undisturbed and forgotten in the dark. Your own existence has become much like theirs, a quiet, folded thing, tucked away in a corner of the castle. On the table, the silver thimble you played with earlier has fallen onto its side. You watch the way the dying light of the embers catches the curve of its rim. It is a tiny, crescent moon of silver in a landscape of dark wood. You decide to perform a task of immense, microscopic detail. You pick up a single strand of the silk you unwound earlier, a thread so fine it is like a spider's web. You attempt to thread it through the eye of a needle by touch alone. You feel the cold steel of the needle, the tiny, elongated hole at its head. You feel the ghost-like friction of the silk against your skin. You fail and you try again and again. The repetition is not frustrating, it is a form of meditation. Each failure is a quiet moment of focus. Each attempt is a slow, rhythmic movement of the hands. Eventually, the silk slides through and you hold the needle up, feeling the slight balanced weight of the steel and the thread. You have created a connection. You have completed a cycle. Your mind drifts to the roof of the tower. Above you, the heavy lead sheets are being scoured by the wind, the metal contracting in the intense cold. You imagine the sound of the snow hitting the lead, not a patter but a soft, collective hiss like the breath of 1,000 ghosts. You think about the gargoyles at the corners of the battlements, their stone mouths frozen open in silent screams, their heads capped with ridiculous white hats of snow. They are the true inhabitants of the winter, and you are their guest. The thought of the frozen, stone monsters guarding your sleep is strangely comforting. The whippet on the rug has entered a state of even deeper slumber. Its breathing has become so light it is almost imperceptible. You watch the fine, white hairs on its muzzle. Each hair is a delicate silver filament. You think about the complexity of the animal, the bones, the muscles, the nerves, all stilled and silent in the heat of the fire. The dog is a masterpiece of biology, reduced to a simple, warm shape in the dark. You feel a profound sense of kinship with the animal. You are both creatures of the hearth, both refugees from the white void outside. You reach for the small bowl of pomegranate seeds again. You take 3 seeds and place them in a line on the walnut table. You observe the spacing between them. You adjust the middle seed by a fraction of a millimeter, ensuring the gaps are perfectly equal. Then, you move the first seed to the end of the line, then the second. It is a slow, geometric game that has no winner and no end. You find yourself fascinated by the way the seeds catch the low light, their dark, leathery skins looking like polished mahogany. This is the extent of your ambition for the hour. Beyond the door, you hear a faint, distant sound, the dry, hollow thud of a heavy log being dropped in the great hall below. It is a muffled sound, traveled through floors of stone and wood, stripped of all its sharp edges. It is a reminder that the life of the castle continues, but it feels like a report from a different planet. Here, in the Mistress's solar, the rules of the world do not apply. There is no hierarchy here, no politics, no expectations. There is only the slow cooling of the stone and the rhythmic fall of the frost. You think about the wax that has pooled on the table. It has now completely hardened, its surface a dull, opaque white. You take your thumbnail and begin to scrape a tiny, thin flake of wax from the edge. The sound is a miniature, dry scritch. You look at the flake. It is as thin as a bee's wing, translucent and fragile. You press it between your fingers and it vanishes, melted back into a liquid state by the heat of your skin. You are a creator and a destroyer of wax worlds. You spend several minutes repeating the process, harvesting tiny flakes of white and watching them disappear. The frost on the window has now covered 3/4 of the glass. It has moved beyond the simple fern patterns and into complex crystalline geometries, hexagons and stars and jagged, icy mountains. You imagine the cold pressing against the outside of the glass, a physical force trying to get in. But the glass, though thin and rippled, is an absolute barrier. It is a thin sheet of frozen sand that holds back the entire weight of the winter. You feel a deep respect for the glass. It is a fragile thing, doing a monumental job. You look at the ink you made. It has thickened into a dense black paste. You take the dry quill and dip just the very tip into the darkness. You draw a single, tiny dot on a scrap of parchment. The dot is perfect, a miniature void on the pale vellum. You watch as the parchment absorbs the moisture, the black circle expanding by a fraction of a hair's breadth before settling into its final shape. You have made a mark. You have recorded a second of the night. You do not write a word, for no word could accurately describe the profound, beautiful boredom of this moment. Your body has reached a state of such stillness that you feel as though you are beginning to petrify. Your legs are heavy and immovable. Your back is a part of the oak chair, and your head is a weight of bone and thought resting against the wood. The transition to sleep is no longer a descent. It is a lateral move, a simple shifting of gears from one form of quiet to another. You are already halfway there. The room is a dream you are having while awake. The water clock, though silent, still draws your eye. You imagine the interior of the lead pipe, the dampness, the silence, the absence of movement. You think about the water in the lower basin, now a still, dark pool. It has finished its journey. It has done its work. Like the water, you have reached your destination. There is nowhere else to go. The night has provided you with everything you need: warmth, silence, and the freedom to be absolutely, magnificently bored. You close your eyes for what you intend to be a moment, but the darkness behind your lids is so rich and inviting that you stay there. You listen to the room, the sigh of the ash, the click of the frost, the muffled thump of your own heart. You are a king's mistress, but you are also the heart of the tower, the spirit of the stone. You are the winter itself, folded into a gown of wool and tucked away in the shadows. The last of the pomegranate seeds falls from the table onto the rushes with a tiny, muted clack. The wind outside gives one final, low moan and then vanishes. The tower is silent. The kingdom is asleep. The final watch of the night has arrived, that fragile liminal space where the deepest black of the sky begins to soften into a cold, translucent charcoal. In the solar, the transformation is nearly complete. The fire is no longer a source of light, but a silent mound of pale, ghostly ash that radiates a faint, residual memory of heat. The room has become a cathedral of shadows, each one heavy and still, pinning the furniture to the stone floor. You are still seated in the high-backed chair, but the woman who sat down hours ago has been replaced by a creature of pure atmosphere, a being woven from the threads of silence and the scent of wood smoke. Your attention, now slow and liquid, settles on the heavy iron key that rests on the edge of the walnut table. It is the key to the cedar chest, a massive piece of forged metal, dark and cold. You reach out and pull it toward you, the iron dragging across the wood with a low, resonant grate. You feel the weight of the key in your hand. It is a dense, honest weight that speaks of security and closure. You trace the bit of the key, the complex series of notches and teeth designed to navigate the internal landscape of a lock. You imagine the tumblers falling into place, a heavy, mechanical clack that echoes through the silence. The key is a promise that things can be locked away, that the world can be held at bay by a simple piece of iron. You hold it for a long time, letting the cold of the metal seep into your palm until the key and the hand are of the same temperature. On the table, the small collection of objects you have interacted with throughout the night, the silver thimble, the jet stone, the pomegranate seeds, the quill, have become a small, scattered museum of your boredom. You begin to gather them, one by one, with the deliberation of a priestess. You place the thimble back into the blue velvet of the sewing box. You hear the tiny clink as it touches its companions. You place the jet stone beside it. You gather the remaining pomegranate seeds, their skins dry and clicking against one another like tiny beads. This act of tidying is a slow ritual of conclusion. You are putting the day to rest, piece by microscopic piece. You think about the great hall far below. By now, the first of the kitchen servants will be stirring in their nests of straw. They will be moving with heavy, rhythmic steps, their breath visible in the freezing air of the hall. You imagine the sound of a flint being struck, a sharp, metallic chink-chink-chink, followed by the first, fragile spark catching the tinder. The fire in the hall will be rebuilt, log by heavy log, but that is a world of noise and labor that has nothing to do with you. Here in the tower, the silence remains unbroken. You are the last custodian of the night's peace. Your gaze travels to the window. The frost has now completely claimed the glass. There is no longer a view of the outside world, only a breathtaking, crystalline map of the cold. The patterns are so thick they have become three-dimensional, building out from the glass in jagged, icy ridges. You imagine the air on the other side of that glass. It would be so cold it would sting the lungs, a pure, sterile vacuum of frost. But inside, the air is soft and seasoned. You feel a profound sense of gratitude for the 3 feet of limestone that stand between you and the infinite winter. The tower is a fortress of the mundane, a sanctuary of the uninteresting. The whippet on the rug finally wakes, but not with a start. It simply opens its eyes and stretches its long, elegant neck. It lets out a long, silent yawn, its pink tongue curling before settling its head back down on its paws. The dog knows that the sun is coming, but it also knows that there is no hurry. You watch the dog's eyes, dark, liquid orbs that reflect the dying violet of the hearth. For a moment, you and the animal share a look of absolute winter understanding. There is no need for movement. There is no need for sound. There is only the shared warmth of the rug and the stone. You think about the king's horses again. They will be hearing the first clatter of buckets in the courtyard, the sound of the well winch creaking as it is forced through the night's ice. You imagine the horses blowing through their nostrils, a soft, vibrating sound that echoes in the rafters. The world is beginning to wake, but it is waking in slow motion, hampered by the weight of the snow. The logistics of the morning, the breaking of ice, The hauling of wood, the clearing of paths will take hours. You have been granted an extension of the quiet. You reach for the leather-bound ledger one last time. You don't read the figures. Instead, you run your hand over the cover. The leather is old and slightly oily with a deep, earthy smell. You feel the ridges of the binding, the strength of the linen threads that hold the pages together. This book is a record of 1,000 small things, none of them important, yet together they form the foundation of a life. You realize that your own life is much like this ledger, a collection of quiet, repetitive moments that, when added together, create a sense of profound stability. You close the book, the heavy cover falling shut with a soft, muffled thump. The light in the room has shifted from violet to a pale, ethereal gray. The shadows are no longer velvet. They are turning into thin, transparent veils. You can now see the individual grains of the walnut table and the fine gray dust that has settled on the silver inkstand. The room is revealing itself in the cold light of the dawn. You look at the ink you made. It is now a solid, matte black, a dry well of potential words. You have no need for it now. The night story has been told in the silence, in the breathing of the dog, and in the growth of the frost. You stand up from the oak chair. The movement is slow, your muscles feeling thick and heavy. Your wool skirts fall around you with a soft, communal rustle. You walk to the alcove where the bed awaits. The bed, warmed hours ago by the brass pan, is still a pocket of soft, inviting heat. You pull back the heavy furs and the midnight blue silk sheets. The smell of lavender and warm linen rises up to meet you, a fragrant cloud that promises total oblivion. You sit on the edge of the mattress, the down feathers yielding beneath you with a soft, wheezing sigh. You remove your leather-soled slippers, feeling the cool stone of the floor for one last second before swinging your legs into the bed. The silk is cool at first, then rapidly absorbs the heat of your body. You pull the heavy wolfskin rugs up to your chin, burying yourself in the layers of wool and fur. You are a seed planted in the heart of a mountain. You are a pearl in a silver box. As you lie there staring up at the dark canopy of the bed, you hear the first bird of the morning, a single lonely crow calling from the battlements. The sound is harsh and distant, a jagged line of noise in a world of smooth silence. It is the signal that your watch is over. The day will come with its demands and its dramas, its king and its court, but that is a world away. For now, there is only the weight of the blankets, the rhythmic breathing of the dog on the hearth, and the infinite, beautiful boredom of a winter sleep. Your eyelids close for the final time. The gray light of the solar fades into a warm, featureless dark. You are no longer the mistress, no longer the keeper, no longer the witness. You are simply a part of the stillness. The history of the kingdom continues outside, but here, under the fur and the silk, the only history is the slow, steady beating of a heart in a house of stone. The frost on the window begins to glow with the first pale hint of the sun. The fire is now only white ash and silence. The world is buried. You are safe. You are warm. You are asleep.